Hey guys, Kristen, Leake here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about interviewing for user experience research positions. And I found this to be a great need when I was looking for tips on interviewing for this type of position, because a lot of things you'll see on YouTube will be interview questions for UX designer positions, or it will just start talking about how to perform or facilitate UX research, which I already know how to do. So today I'm gonna talk about how I prepared for my interviews and the questions that I saw. Starting off, I kind of had a checklist, and some of the things are not absolutely necessary, but it's good to have just in case. So that's what I did. I always prepared for the worst scenario of things. So for example, the first thing on my list I see on my computer over here is print off 4 resumes, 1 extra. So I have on my number 1 to print off 4 resumes, and one of those is extra. So I knew I would be speaking to 3 people, but in experience, sometimes you end up speaking to someone else or a couple other people. So I have that to bring in, and there are times when you go in and the interviewers will already have copies of your resume, which is nice to have, but just in case, I have a folder with that in it so they can kind of briefly go over it, because sometimes your interviewer will not have time to actually prepare because they're busy with work and projects. Second on my list is to practice behavioral questions and then technical questions. So what I've learned through the many interviews is that there are 2 different types of questions that you see, and it's a typical formula for most interviews, and it's behavioral and technical. Behavioral kind of applies more to your personality, trying to see if you fit the work culture, things like that. So it could be questions about like your hobbies, any other interests you may have. It could just be more personal, kind of casual questions. And technical questions, obviously that's more UX based. Oh, and I do want to add to the behavioral questions, it can also be kind of how you interact with other people. So what type of work environment you like. Do you go up to people when you have a question, or do you just message them on instant messenger? How are you in certain like conflicts, work conflicts, things like that. So those are the 2 types of questions you need to prepare for, and I will be sharing specific questions about those further in this video. So next on my checklist, I had to prepare questions for each person. So most often, they will let you know who you will be interviewing with. This is when you do background information, you background check. So I would go on LinkedIn and type in the name of every single person I would be interviewing with and just understand their background. So one person would be a UX director, and I see the bullet points of everything that they do, and I look at their background, I'm like, wow, like they are really accomplished in this area, or they specialize in this area. So I try to ask questions related to that about what our relationship would be like, or just questions about the projects that they do, things like that, to make it more personal. Let's see, bring a notebook or folder with pen. That's important, especially if you're bringing in those resumes, to look professional. Have 2 to 3 stories prepared to share. So sometimes you may be asked a question that you haven't prepared for, and so I found that there are general stories that are good to just throw out there if you feel unprepared. So maybe a story about just hard work, something general like that, and you already have it at the top of your brain. And so when they ask you a question kind of related to it, but not specifically like about hard work or about going over and beyond, you can pull out certain areas of it once you already have an idea of something you can talk about, instead of sitting in an interview. You're already prepared and can just elaborate more to cater to that question. And the last one is having a closing statement at the end. So just being prepared to have a solid finish, because I always feel like those are the most memorable. Okay, now let's get into the questions for a user experience researcher interview. So kind of more general introductory stuff I found is people want me to introduce myself and summarize my experience, which is pretty self-explanatory. I had a question of, why do you do what you do? And this is when you pretty much talk about your passion, why you were interested in UX. And I often talk about how I just love how technology makes our lives so much easier. And allows us to work more efficiently. Let's see. What professional accomplishment are you proud of and why? This is a great way to kind of brag a little bit about what you've already done. Oh, and this next question, if you do apply to like a consulting IT firm, you will most likely see this, which is tell me about a time you have worked with clients. So if you've done any freelancing or any gigs for friends, this would be a great time to have a story formulated to share what it was like working with someone, working with a client. Okay, here's an example of a behavioral question, which is what do you do outside of work to improve yourself as a professional? I said that I have UX mentors that I meet for lunch or coffee and to just get feedback or to learn more about other UX processes that I can apply to my profession, to my career. And I also talked about how I attend meetup groups and design websites for clients and things like that. Blogs, LinkedIn. I mean, you can, I mean, me personally, it's a lot. So I think that's a really fun conversation to have, and just remember to have that in your back pocket. As well as interests and hobbies outside of work, that's also pretty easy and fun. Just be honest, don't make up any lies. I talk a lot about how I love hiking, snowboarding, camping, all my adventures outdoors. So let's see. I did get, what was interesting, this applies to this next question I just saw. I found interesting that a company asked me a UX design related question, although I was applying for research. And I can kind of understand why, but it definitely made me realize, okay, I kind of have to prepare to answer these design questions as well. So, example is, what is UX design and why does it matter? And I've also been asked, how would you explain the ideal UX design process? So these are pretty much like textbook. You have to give like textbook answers and just put it in your own words. You should be familiar with the design process in UX, so just be able to say it in your own words. Another good one that's behavioral is, what is your most challenging project that you've had to do? So that's another fun story and a good idea to have in your back pocket. Another design question, what does design thinking mean to you? This was actually asked to me twice. The first time it was asked to me, I kind of had to not guess, but just go off of my own opinion of what design thinking was, and afterwards I looked up and realized there's an actual textbook definition of design thinking. So again, even though you're a researcher, you may be asked these design questions, so be prepared. Okay, question 12 that I've been asked. So how do you know that what you're designing works for the user? Tell us about your approach to research and incorporating research in your work. So this is really great, and in this question I talked about the user interviews and surveys and just how users often don't really know what they need, and so that's when I look into data analytics and things like that to pull out that information to make design recommendations. You pretty much just talk about how, like, the techniques that you use to learn as much as you can about the user for that question. What area of research do you enjoy doing the most? I love this. I love these questions that talk about passion because I really love prototype testing. So that's what I talked about. So if you like user interviews, if you like card sorting, that's cool too. No wrong answer. It's just be able to talk about it, show your passion, show that you are experienced in it, and even share a story. I've noticed that a lot of people like stories in these situations. Okay, so here's a good one. What are you really great at in UX, and what do you need to improve on? So this is something you definitely need to reflect on. It kind of reminds me of the whole, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and trying to make your weaknesses sound like they could be strengths, but really try to stay genuine. Oh, this next question I don't really like. No, I only don't like it when I'm not prepared for it. So after I was asked this question once, I was like, I gotta have this figured out. So this question is, why should we hire you? This is pretty much your pitch to them Pretty much share that you are unique and irreplaceable, and just really market yourself. This is another opportunity where you can just brag about yourself and show how you are going to help the company. So don't let it be about how much you want to work there, just be about the things that you can provide for them and make improvements and just make their team even more successful with you on the team. Oh, okay. This is a tough question. It's tough when people ask you what your research process is, because it always depends on the project, the situation, the client, you know, like maybe the client already has previous research, and so you kind of look through there and then make a decision. Like look through there as in if they already had some interviews, if they've already done some card sorting, you look at those results and then identify, okay, if there are any holes, okay, this is what we should do to fill in these holes, these are some blockers, okay, things like that. Obviously money can kind of affect how much research you have or how you do it, time especially, maybe even where they are in building this product. So you could actually be doing a redesign, or you can be starting completely from square one. So I find this to be always really tricky, but I try to summarize the best way I can when talking about my research process. So that's definitely something you'll be asked. Not everyone asks, but that's definitely something that's important to be prepared for, because this is what you are applying for. Okay, so this looks like, oh no, I have a few more questions I have here that I documented. Remember, all these questions are things that have been asked to me. So some more behavioral questions right here. I've been asked, tell me a time when you disagreed with a team member and what resulted from it. So this is story time. Tell me about a time your research influenced a design decision. So this kind of overlaps with the other question about tell me how your research has influenced a design decision. It definitely overlaps, and that's kind of the nice thing. Once you get like your one little story or spiel down, you can kind of use it in different interviews. How do you determine what features to make in a product? So this kind of goes into your research making, or excuse me, this kind of goes into how doing research can influence design decisions. Tell me about a time you failed. That's an excellent behavioral question. And how do you define success as a researcher? So going into what I said before, the last thing on my checklist was about being able to close strong, or being prepared to ask any questions at the end. So these are a couple things I wrote down. I think there are more things that I did, and some stuff I just do off the cuff because I interviewed so many places. I kind of just like got into a group of interviews. But one thing I always ask is there anything you'd like me to share or clarify? So I know sometimes when you're in an interview, you can gloss over something, or you can forget to share something, and maybe your experience doesn't come off as strong as it really is, or maybe you discuss a project in little details and you should have elaborated because it kind of confused the interviewer about what exactly you did or what the outcome was. So it's always good to ask, is there anything you'd like me to elaborate on and clarify, just so they don't have any like preconceived notions about what you said. Maybe if you were able to elaborate, it would change their whole thought about you, or how you are as or how your work is, how your work performance is. Lastly, just saying what you want. And this is something I do have to prepare depending on the company. It's very specific to the company. So I have like saying, thanks for your time. I like to go ahead and just share that this is exactly what I'm looking for. I know I would enjoy this environment because of 1, 2, and 3, and I've also done 1, 2, and 3 in the past, and so it just feels like a really great fit, and I know this will be a smooth transition. So just something like that. I know that was kind of like a little rough, but I feel like that's a okay outline to go with. Just sharing why, or just go ahead and saying that, like, I am really interested. It's like a date. You know, you're going on a date with someone and you're into them, and you don't want them to think, oh, maybe they're not into me, maybe I should go with someone else. Just be like, look, I am into you. I am into you. and I'm into you for these reasons. And I think we're a good fit because I can also provide this, and this to the table. So it's showing the company how you will help them succeed as well, and you guys can both be happy. And that's pretty much it. So I've been debating actually typing up all these questions. If you do want that, let me know below, and maybe I can create like a downloadable source for you. I really wish there were more resources for UX research interviews, but I hope this was helpful. And if you have any other questions, just leave a comment below, and best of luck to you in your interview process. Talk to you later. Bye.